Hi, my name's Bleeze. I believe that we all have a story to share, one that can help others heal. This is a little of mine. I think I might have just had my 20th birthday. I had been suicidal, and so, I was at a point in my life where I was just craving something, craving love, really. Like, I didn't really feel that I'd had a lot of that in my life at all. And I met this guy. He. Hmm, we were so wrapped up in each other, like so incredibly wrapped up in each other. And those relationships, you meet people and the whole world just fades away and nothing else matters. And so when I met him, like, he took all the pain that I'd been feeling away. He made me think that I deserved to I suppose to have more, like to dare to want more, to dare to have happiness, to dare to believe that someone could love me. Oh fuck. um, and I had not had that before. Not really. I didn't feel that I had it anyway. I didn't, see it as that way. And so I held on to him, and we developed this relationship that turned very toxic very quickly. He was very um, he was very violent and very at times inhumane, and the warning signs were there. When I think back now, and little things that he would say to me. The first time that he laid his hands on me, I was pregnant with my daughter. I had just come out of hospital. I'd had a bleed and ended up in hospital, I don't know, I can't remember, maybe halfway through my pregnancy. And I remember being in hospital all alone. I remember they brought support in for me because I had no, my mum was living in Coffs Harbour, I had no support around me. And anyway, they let me out of hospital and I went back to his parents' place. And because I'd had no support, I was just so desperate to connect to somebody. And so I remember ringing my friend, and she hadn't known that I was in hospital, and I rang her and organised to go out and see her. He wasn't there at the time. He'd gone out because, that's what he did. My memory is that, like, I was walking out the door and he was walking, like, he came in at the same time, and we had this fight because I just wanted to, like, I just needed to connect to someone. And I remember him grabbing me. He didn't hit me, but he dragged me down the hair. Down the hair. He dragged me down the hallway. Yeah, by my hair. And I remember having this huge belly. Um, and that he just didn't care. He just didn't, and that was the first time that he harmed me. There were times of emotional abuse before that, but that was the first time that he ever really put his hands on me. And I remember being in so much shock. I just didn't understand how it was happening to us. It What set him off never made any sense. And believing me, I've given so much thought to this. For it never made any sense. It never made any sense. You could just look at him the wrong way, but it got to it got to a point. It wouldn't matter if I didn't say anything. I would cop abuse for that. I would get hit for that, and then if I did say something, I would then get hit for that too. So it made no difference. And so I think all throughout our time together, there would be times where I just wouldn't say anything. I'd be too scared to talk, and there'd be times where I'd be like, what, I'm gonna get hit anyway, so I might as well just give as good as I get. And I would speak up. I hit him back once ever, and broke my hand on his head. So so that was interesting. He'd been out, and I was putting my daughter to sleep. She would have been, it's probably in the year that I left, so she would have been maybe about 4. And he got home, So he came into the bedroom and started going like ranting, and raving and screaming, and just really going off his head. And I was lying next to my daughter and he started hitting into me. And I remember her screaming. And so I was lying next to her and he was hitting into me, and I just snapped, and hit him in the head and broke my hand. Um, so that was not fun. Yeah, it wasn't fun at all. I don't even know. Fuck. Um, so yeah, like nothing. How he or what set him off. There was just never. There was never. It just never made sense at all. It just. He would be just a big walking contradiction. You know, he would hear about a friend being abusive to his partner, and he would bag him, or he would speak, up about that, but then he would do it to me the next day. Like he just there was no sense to him at all. Um, yeah, no sense. There are so many. Yeah, there are so many, um, times throughout that period that he would be hitting me, or I'd be on the ground, he'd be kicking me, and that I thought that I would die. You know, I remember him. He would tell me that he would dream at night of stabbing us in our sleep. You know, he would dream at night of, oh my god, so many different ways that he would kill us. And he would tell me about it. It's really easy for women who are in those situations, of domestic violence to think that they are to blame, that they've done something wrong, and that's how I lived. I would say sorry for everything, even if I hadn't done anything. I would be walking on, eggshells every day. And I believed this before I met him anyway, but he just really ingrained that in me. I believed that, I just wasn't worth anything at all, and that I carried a lot of shame around being in this situation. I didn't tell my family. My family didn't know. Um, all the time that we were together, my family didn't know. I kept it secret because I carried so much shame, because it was my fault. And people talked about, oh, why don't you leave? Why don't you just leave? Why do you put up with it? Um, Thought about that too a lot, and like, why didn't I leave? And I didn't have my dad growing up, and so I never wanted I never wanted to raise my kids without their dad. And you gotta remember, like, back then I was naive. Like, I didn't really get the concept of what trauma could do to a person, and not like just witnessing trauma. Like, he never laid a hands on them. So, in my way of thinking, he was a good dad to them, and that's how I would rationalize it. Oh, he's being good. He's good to them. He sits down and colors in with them. He gives them cuddles. My daughter idolized like idolized him, and so I use those excuses to stay, to put up with it, because I believe that if I left, then you know I was depriving them of their dad. Not realizing that everything that they witnessed, and it wasn't like everything would be great for months and then we'd have a blow up and a fight and he'd be violent. Like, this was and I'm not saying he was violent every day, but it was a daily thing. I remember walking home, and I think about this often actually. I was going to the gym a lot. I was training to be a fitness instructor, and I remember walking home. I'd walk home every day from the gym, and I'd walk up our street, and I remember the feeling of anxiety and panic that would set in when I was probably halfway, just wondering if he was home and if he was going to be awake. And I remember, like, I'd see his car in the driveway, and it would freak me, like, I'd freak me out. And then, in comparison to if his car was gone, just the feeling of the relief that would come over me. And then, if he was home, I'd walk in, and most of the time he would be asleep, and he had a raging pot habit. And if he didn't, smoking was what kept him calm. And so he would wake up, and most of the time he wouldn't have anything. And so he'd, within minutes be flying into a rage, or, be quite abusive towards me, and often quite violent as well, because I couldn't solve his problem for him. I didn't have pot to give him, I didn't smoke. So he would take all his frustration, anger, out on me. And so that kind of happened on a daily basis. And so my kids were subjected to that daily. And there's been many times over the years that my daughter has held me accountable for staying. And so even though my kids were not physically ever touched, the emotional trauma is still there for them. And they both still struggle in their own ways with that. Yeah. And so people wonder, why do people stay? Or why would women stay? Why do men stay? I've known men who've been in that situation as well. And, the reasons will vary. And what's changed in me that I see that now, oh my God, everything. I'm a different person. I'm more self-aware. I'm stronger within myself. I've grown, I've healed. I understand human behaviour more. I understand the effects that trauma has on us. I understand that through my own learnings and development in the work that I do, in my own healing journey. I understand that through watching what my children have gone through, and wishing that I could turn back time in some ways and not have them have that experience at all. So I know now that, it doesn't matter where you've come from. It doesn't matter what your experiences have been, or the stories that you tell yourself because of your upbringing, or lack thereof, or experiences, or programming, or conditioning, or whatever way you want to look at that. No one deserves to be mistreated. No one deserves to cop any type of abuse. And so I suppose I think it just comes down to how self-aware I am now in comparison to how self-aware I was then. I was so young, so naive. I looked for I was looking for validation. I was looking for someone else to validate that I was worthy, to validate that I could be loved. And now what's different is I don't need that validation. I know that I'm worthy. I know that I deserve love, and I think a big thing that changed as well is that I don't look for anyone else, or I don't need anyone else now to give me that. I have that myself. I've spent so many years on this discovery for self-love and what that means for me, and that's what's different. I have love for myself. I have respect for myself, and in that I have very clear boundaries of how I deserve to be treated and what I'll put up with. Whereas before I was just open slather. However you want to treat me, it's fine. It's whatever, and that's through other experiences I'm not going to go through now. It had just been ingrained in my soul that I was there to be a doorstop, a punching bag, and now I know different. Yeah. So if myself now, this self was talking to my past self back then, what I was thinking about this last night, and I'm just going to go on a bit of a tangent for a moment. I remember this because it kind of ties into what was said to me. I remember this time I was sitting on was sitting on the floor in my kitchen. I can't remember, we must have just had a fight, or I don't remember those details. But you know, every day was a fucking nightmare anyway. So it kind of just blends in. But I was sitting on the floor and I remember ringing the helpline. I don't remember which one. I just remember ringing the helpline because I'd gotten to the point where I either kill him, I kill myself, or I leave. They were the only three choices that I thought that I had, that my life had anymore. That was it. And so I remember this helpline, you know, calling and them saying to me that the only choice is to leave. And so what would I say to my past self that had 2 young children and no support, and that felt she had no other options? I would tell her to leave. I would tell her that it doesn't get any better, it just gets worse. I would tell her that there is no excuse for the behaviour that she's receiving. I would tell her that there's another way. I would tell her that she can survive this and that there's a future for her through the pain that she's feeling. I would tell her that to leave. I would tell her to leave, to do whatever she could to seek the resources, to seek the support, and there is support out there now. There's so much support out there now. There was very little back then, and so I would tell her to find support. There's hotlines, there are organisations now, there are so many frigging options giving women a way out, even if they own nothing, even if they have no money, and they need to leave everything behind. When I left everything behind. I got back, but I just packed up my kids, had a few clothes, and I left. So what did it take me to leave? I had, and I mentioned this before, I'd not told my family. I'd kept it from them. And my sister would come and visit me. My sister was maybe 12, I think, at the time. And she came to visit me this one time, and I don't even know how it started, but George started getting very aggressive, and you need to realise that when he went off, like he had a big heart, and I know this is going to sound really fucked up, but he had a big heart, and he was loving and caring, and there was also this switch that would just it would just click over, and then he was the devil. Like, you would look into his eyes and he was a completely different person. There was no rationalizing with him. It was like looking into a big, dark, fucking scary void. Like, it was terrifying. And so this, and then on the other hand, he could be charming and he could charm the pants off, anyone, right? And then he was this monster. And so anyway, so my sister was there, and he started going off his head, and he was getting really scary. And I know, like, I knew his moods. I knew that, like, trouble was coming. I knew what was going to happen. And so I kind of told her, like, take the kids and go in the playroom. We had this room down the back of the house. And so he took the kids there, and, he beat me up. And that was a turning point for me, because I couldn't hide from it anymore. What shame would there, like, I had shame anyway around it, but what shame would there be then if I still stayed after everyone knew, and I don't even know if that logic makes sense, but that's kind of what the thinking was at the time, certainly. And so And so I left. I'd left before that, but I had come back. But this time I left. We, after it finished, um, we kind of, as I would do, just get up and go on about the day and just pretend that nothing had happened. So we kind of, okay, let's go now. And, I think it was a zoo, we went out somewhere. Um, and when I came back, he was gone. Um, and I organised my sister to get picked back up by her dad. And yeah, I left. I made arrangements to leave. My mum lived interstate. My sister was visiting from interstate. No, I didn't have anyone to come and get me. In saying that though, I did go and stay with my auntie. I think that's got the ball rolling. I went and stayed with her, and then I went up and moved into my mum's place for a little bit interstate. So I had that place to go. But before that happened, I don't know. I just had never seen that as an option. But yeah, there was no one to come and save me, and he chased everyone away. I had him and his family, and that was it. And if it wasn't for his sisters, I probably would have ended up dead. Um, I think I would have either taken my life. So they were something. We would go and visit his family often, and so I would hang out with his sisters, and we were quite close. We still are. So I'm hoping they're not too horrified by watching this video, but that's okay. It is what it is. Yeah, so they were my support. I remember going to the police once. It's the only time, actually, there was twice. I went to the police twice. Once when I broke my hand on his head, and I must admit they were willing to press charges if I wanted to, but I had nowhere to go, and I knew that would just make it worse. I just knew that it would. And then another time, we weren't even together anymore. I had brought the kids down to see him, and as soon as I walked in the house, I just knew what was going to happen. And so I remember going to the bathroom, making an excuse to go to the toilet, and ringing my friend to come and get me to come down to the house. And so he came down with his partner, who worked in protective services or something along those lines. But anyway, they came down and got me out, but not before. I remember I had my son in this arm, my daughter in this arm, and he's hitting me, and I remember my daughter just screaming, and I remember my son just, his whole body just sort of shrunk, and he buried his little face into my body just to make it stop. And so I went to the police then, and they basically told me that there was no point in pressing charges, because I had no witnesses at the time that he'd hit me, apart from his family. Even though he was known to the police, even though he had a massive fucking record of violence, they would get called to his house all the time. And so the police knew what he was capable of, knew how he abused people, but that was still not, so it makes no sense. They just sort of look, yeah, it's just, nothing's going to happen. And I didn't press charges. I think the responsibility that we play in stopping someone like that, I think we all really need to take some level of responsibility in speaking up. Sometimes it's not, it's easier said than done though. He did actually go to jail for some time for domestic violence with his ex-wife. I was still married. So he did go to jail for some time, but it took a lot. It took a lot. Like he should have, he should have had, punishment from a law perspective a lot sooner than he did. And you know what? We failed there as well, because when I was with him, I could have spoken up more. You know, I could have contacted the police more. He needed help. You know, he was, you know, and we only recognise this now. Like, he had mental health issues, for sure he did, and there was no diagnosis, there was no, but for sure, you know, and if we had have spoken up, if we had have perhaps gotten him committed and got him the help that he needed. But I think that, you know, we live in a society that so many people are willing to turn a blind eye. I think we just all need to speak up. You know, if you see someone, you know, I remember this one time, I would have been 8 months pregnant with my daughter. No, my son, because my daughter was I was pushing my daughter. 8 months pregnant with my son. I got home late, not late as in night, just late from shopping. He would, when he ran out of money, he had a raging gambling and drug addiction, and when he ran out of money, which was always, he would bash me for mine. Right, this would be money to pay my rent. This would be money to feed my kids. I remember at one point having to share a packet of 2-minute noodles with my daughter every fucking day because that's all I could afford, right? And anyway, I got home this one day and he wanted to go and score. And I don't know, for some reason he had needed to wait for me. I can't remember if it was for money that time or I don't know. But I had a doctor's appointment. It went longer than I thought. You know, all this other stuff as well had happened, and I got home, and you know, he just started on me as soon as I walked in the door. Anyway, he made me walk up the street with him, and I remember walking up the street, and I was heavily fucking pregnant, and I was a big pregnant, not like one of these girls where you hardly see it. I was a big waddling fucking penguin, and walking up the street. And he was fucking kicking into my legs, punching into my arms, and no one stopped. And I lived on a busy road. There were cars going past. And no one stopped at all. People walking past, no one stopped. I remember getting home. He didn't come home with me. I remember getting home that day and just walking through the front door and just falling to the ground and doing everything in my power just not to hyperventilate. Like, it was the most emotionally excruciating experience. And I remember my daughter just sitting and watching me from the pram. But maybe if one person had spoken out that day, and I appreciate that, and look, you hear it, people speak up, they get killed, right? It's happened, you know, and I appreciate that it takes a lot to put yourself in harm's way for someone else that you don't know. But someone could have rung the police, you know. So if you are neighbours to someone that you hear abuse happening in their home, ring the fucking police. If you see a woman pregnant walking down the street getting beat into, ring the fucking police. You know, it's that simple. And so how can we take responsibility? Keep a fucking eye out, you know, and just watch out for your neighbour, watch out for your fellow human being. It doesn't matter if they're female or male. We're all here. We're all living this life. You know, we're meant to be supporting each other. And so we can take responsibility by just speaking out in whatever manner, you know, however that comes. Talking about this now, there are so many layers to that, but I'm going to keep it super simple, and it's more just so because I know that there are women out there that are going to watch this video and be literally in a situation of domestic violence happening in their life, playing out in their life right now. And I want them to know that they're not alone, that even though we might not know each other, that I see them, other people will see them. I want them to know that there is help out there for them, even if they are all alone. There are so many resources now, so many. that there just aren't any reasons to stay in that situation. There's not. And so I suppose I'm doing this video now, one, because Spirit are busting my ass to do it. For two, because it's a part of my journey, my experiences that I had in my life. I had them so I can share and show others that healing is possible. I'm doing this now because, and it has been for a while, domestic violence is on the rise. Like, it's a ridiculous number of women that get killed weekly, monthly. People are dying from this. And men need to know that it's okay to leave, that they deserve to leave, that they deserve better, and that there actually is better on the other side. I'm living proof of that. But yeah, I'm living proof of that. I'd like to think that I am. So my journey I think being able to say that I'm a survivor of domestic violence doesn't just start from, or doesn't necessarily start from when I left the situation. I don't think I was, yes, I was a survivor. I survived, I got out, but I think the real surviving, that point where I went from being a victim, that this happened to me, to surviving and really, to really, fuck, I feel empowered. I'm a survivor. I'm empowered in that. I think that took a while. I think that when I left George first, and I'll be honest, and it won't be like this for everyone, like, things were messy. I'd been kept in a cage for 5-6 years or whatever, like, and can you imagine keeping an animal, and that's what I felt like, an animal kept in a cage and letting them out. So I went a little bit wild. Things got a little bit messy in other ways, because I was unraveling this whole process of learning to accept myself and who I was again. Like, I didn't even know who I was. So there was this whole uncovering of that, and I struggled. I really, really struggled with that. Created new trauma, healed from other trauma, and also, it took me a while to tackle the trauma of my experience in, being in a violent situation and a violent partnership. It took me a while to probably tackle that. And so, what was the fucking question? I'm sorry. And so, after I left, I didn't just get to this place where everything was suddenly rosy or okay. Like, I really had to put in the work to make changes within myself. I was all sorts of fucked up when I met him, like all sorts of fucked up. And so, when I left, there was so many different layers of healing that I needed to go through in order to make sure I never step into a relationship like that again. And I haven't ever. I've had relationships since that failed for other reasons, but I never ever stepped into that type of relationship again, because I healed the aspects of myself that allowed that journey to begin with. If you, for someone that has a really strong sense of self-power and self-worth and self-control, the chances are lessened for them to get into that situation. Now, I'm not going to say that they wouldn't exist at all, because there can be some very manipulative people out there that kind of get you at that point, pre-abuse, get you right at that, get you primed up for it, regardless of how strong you are. But it certainly lessens the risk of stepping into an abusive relationship if you, have courage and strength in yourself, if you have a really good mental and emotional balance. And so that takes work. And so I've been on this journey for the last 20 odd years since leaving to, unravel what that looks like for me. And it's been rocky, and there have been a lot of times where I have felt lost in that, but I would not change it, and I've come out the other side, just more in tune and more able to honour my word. We owe it to ourselves to heal from that experience. And again, there are many resources that you can look towards. I was more drawn to, I suppose, more alternative therapies. I was drawn more to healing through my own spiritual development, and that's probably really what started my deeper journey to healing was connecting to spirit and finding my way and finding out who I was through those means. But there are psychologists out there, there are trauma specialists. There's a whole range of organisations and modalities that can help, for sure. Have that trust that you do deserve better, that you don't deserve to be treated this way at all. And that's not something that, like, you can't just go from, for instance, feeling really sad to fucking joyous in one bounce. Do you know what I mean? That's a process. And so I understand, just by me saying, oh, you deserve better, I understand that you're necessarily, if you're watching this right now and this is resonating, that you're not necessarily going to be able to get to the concept yourself instantaneously that you deserve better. And so, I suppose the point that I'm trying to make is it's a process. And so give yourself permission to at least be open to the idea that, oh, maybe I do deserve better. What could that look like? Perhaps come from that point of view. Be curious about it, and just allow that to just allow that to be, to be in your mind, to be very present in your mind, and for you to have that conversation with yourself, and allow it to go from there. Because I appreciate that we can't just, someone says something, hey, this is what it is for you, you got to come to that conclusion yourself, and it is a process. So just know that you don't deserve to be treated that way. You deserve to have respect in your life, but that respect also starts with you respecting yourself, and that respecting yourself looks like, or can look like, you not allowing anyone to treat you like shit anymore. Just be curious about what that could look like for you. The idea that you have people around you that only treat you with respect, that only value your worth, that only show you love, that only value your opinion, that only, whatever else you need or could be experienced in your life, just allow yourself to be curious about what that could look like for you, and allow it to, I suppose, just unravel and manifest in your life without getting too woo-woo in this video. Again, it's a process. And so, for those that might be watching this and are in situations of abuse now, I think the first step is just realizing that it's time to leave, and asking yourself what that needs to look like.